I guess my name is Jacob Tolo. I'm this year's curator for the Gertrude Street Projection Festival, if you don't know me. And I'd like to start off by saying that the Gertrude Street Projection Festival is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and we would like to acknowledge and pay respects to them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging from all Kulin nations. Having that, it's like I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. We have three artists who have all, you know, graciously like accepted our invitation to join us on such short notice for this, I guess, our first Zoom sort of webinar. We have with us, I'm going to start clockwise with Andrea Draper. We have Susan Maco Forrester and Dr. Kirsten Lyttle joining us on the panel. Thank you all again for joining me. I guess we're in the middle. We're in the middle of this kind of present and future and past all wrapped into each other, which is tied in nicely with my curatorial premise. I think it was this idea originally that maybe we could have some utopian visions of the future, fast forward 500 years from now, to do with cultures and communities. I might step back further and with the curatorial premise that I first proposed to Gertrude Street Projection Festival. The idea came from an essay written by Mark Derry in the 1990s, around 1996, I think it was. And it had been in the back of my head for the last couple of decades or something. And this idea, the essay, he interviewed three science fiction writers, African-American science fiction writers, and he sort of posited this idea that there weren't enough African-Americans writing about their own futures as science fiction, or like, yeah, these ideas that the futures of African-Americans were being written by white people, and it was taking the lead out of their hands, or the control out of their hands, to imagine their own futures. And that's always stuck with me. I think thinking about it from a Pacific view, also from a queer view, and also just being an immigrant in a new country, that idea that my story was being written by somebody else kind of sat uncomfortably with me. So when I came to write the premise for this, I kind of opened it up to a lot of different communities. I wanted people from different backgrounds and different cultures and different experiences to talk about what they saw would be a distant future for them, or speculative future for them 500 years from now. And the original idea was also to look back at what we know that informs our present and will definitely be carried on into the future, which is what speculative fiction was about at the time. Because it was written in the 90s, there's been this wave of science fiction writers from many cultures that I'm connected to, and these intersections have happened in the last 20, 30 years. So it's exciting to see, but I just wanted to see if it was in a more minute detail with other cultures, if it was like a familiar thread that was carried on, if that makes any sense. Yeah, I might throw it up to you guys and maybe get some thoughts about it and how your work may have related to that or not at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was just going to jump in there. I think for me, looking at and even how to make work for this, for the projection festival, I kept thinking of, there's a phrase in Māori that the ancestors are in front and we stand behind. And what I really love about it is it's a really different view of viewing time. Instead of having linear time, that, the past is back there and then we're in the present and the future's over there, some Māori scholars have actually said that time is more like a wormhole, that it's actually, in Māori ways of thinking, time can actually be three-dimensional. So there's that idea that the that ancestors can be with us in the present, they can be in the past, they can be in the future simultaneously, which kind of, to me, is it kind of blew my mind when I thought about it. But I love that idea that a storyline doesn't have to be that linear idea of the future is always better, and we've got this progress where we're continually moving forward. I think in a Pacific kind of framework, at least in my background as a Māori scholar, I think it's interesting to see different plays on that. And I guess some of what my work is trying to engage you with is the idea of a different way of viewing both time but history. And my kind of medium is photography, and a couple of years ago, I read an article by a scholar who was saying that, we use technology, and she was talking about how do you. She's an author by the name of Deirdre Brown, who's a professor at Auckland University, and she was talking about the ways in which digital technology is completely in line with Māori and other Indigenous ways of thinking. And the way she did that is she said, look, I can make it really important in a Māori framework. And she did that by giving it a whakapapa or an ancestral line. So in the Māori world, everything is important if you can trace it back to a god. And what she did is she said that photography and digital technology and even augmented reality can be seen in a Māori worldview by linking it to the line of carving. So it can go back historically to a line of a god. And the work that I made for the festival is basically the visual representation of that, of trying to show the ancestral line of photography and new technology by following the line through Māori gods. So it's kind of like a cross between 70s sci-fi and my version of what Māori gods look like in the family history, I guess.
Yep, that was so exciting to me when you first laid out the premise. It was like mind-blowing, that idea that something physical had led to something digital as well, and there was a clear line in my head, the way you described it, from carving to photography to digital outputs. And it's like, yeah,
because it's that carved, that idea that like carvings in the Māori world, carvings are like because they're a representation of people. They're like a photograph is a representation of people. So the idea is that you can trace it back, and they're spoken to and talked to. Photographs are brought out at funerals, for example, at tangis, and they're addressed. So there's this whole idea of interacting with different materials as well that I think is kind of interesting.
I've got to be honest, I'm a Doctor Who fan as well, so
yeah,
you tick so many boxes for me with the work. For those of you who haven't seen it, you definitely need to go see this. Yep.
It's the growing up in the 70s. I can't help it. I love Doctor Who.
Nice.
Jacob, I wanted to maybe jump in there as well. Yep. I'm sitting in my car. It is jet black outside. My whole street, everyone's power's gone down. The street lights aren't even on. And I feel it like I'm in this very strange liminal space sitting in my car. And I have to keep the engine running so the battery doesn't go flat. And in thinking about that, it really took me back to that idea that, and just coming from what you're saying, Kirsten, is the idea that, that you have to step backwards to step into the future. And all of us, I think, we've had many talks, yourself, Jacob and I, about our own cultures, mine being Somali and Scottish. But that idea of like the idea of linear time, I think that when we, in our travels, in our artwork and in our lives, when we discovered different ways, it triggers the memory that you have as a child and the cultural memory that you have that you might not be in the front of your mind, but you tap into. And you take that with your work no matter what you're doing. And I think that realization is a very, very powerful one, and I think it really makes me think there is nothing but now. And to think of the future, I have to think of right now. But but I'm stepping backwards. So it's that liminal space where you have your feet aren't on the ground necessarily, but you're stepping sort of like this all the time. And the project that I did with for the festival with the children that reside in the Atherton Gardens estate, that really made me think about that, because they were very clear about connecting the future to right now. And they were very free in what they were doing, and it was quite challenging for me. And I think that, you know, we talk about, I feel very dystopian right now. It's a bit scary. I am waiting for the zombies to bash on the bonnet. But I think it's like our concept of elders, our concept of listening, the fact that we are guests here, you know, on unceded land. I feel very comfortable about the concept of being an uninvited guest. I think it sort of helps me to keep repositioning, you know, my respect and acknowledgement. But I think children, it's been really interesting working with children, because they kind of snap you back in a way, and they keep you, you know, this project that I did, you know, we talked about it, came up with the idea in September, and we've been working on it ever since, myself and Billy Raffin, who I know is listening out there. But those kids held us to task the whole way through. And they were constantly talking, and the kind of freedom that they had, they were aged between 6 and maybe 11 or 12. So that it was still that time, you know, largely of innocence, but they were locked in lockdown in high-rise flats. You know, so when they were out and about between lockdowns, they were really free, and it wasn't hard at all for them to dream up their concepts, and their concepts were all about flight and all about superpowers. So I thought that was really interesting. We did talk about superheroes, but all of them had a particular power. So listening to yourself and Jacob right now, Kirsten, has made me really think of that cultural knowledge that we have, that sometimes isn't in the front of our mind, but it's always, you know, in our hearts. And when we practice and we dream and think, but it just keeps snapping us back and triggering things. So I found that very much part of the process in thinking of Jacob's vision.
Yeah, I'd like to touch more on the project itself, Susan, if you could. I know we're living in this dystopian present at the moment, and it's kind of up and down. But that project, in particular for me, was it's kind of like an optimistic view. It was a future that these kids could imagine for themselves, or their grandchildren, or their, you know, whoever comes 500 years from now, that could be the future. Yeah.
Number one, they were still alive. And that's something I grappled with. I remember an episode of Black Mirror where there was a teenage girl telling her parents she wanted to become code. I don't know if anyone remembers that one. She just decided, because they thought she was about to tell them she wanted to transition. And they were all over that, and they were sitting with her and really, you know, listening. She said, no, I want to become code. Like, she wanted to actually release her body and become code, because she thought she would live forever. And I could never get that out of my mind. And when I was working with the kids, and, you know, the resilience of children, and the kids were from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Syria, and I'm just trying to think of some other Eastern European countries. I was just trying to recall in the dark right now. But it was a no-brainer for them, you know, and that thing of like the fact that they, you know, had experienced many lockdowns and the difficulties around that. So when they were out, when they were at the Fitzroy Adventure Playground, which is where, you know, they all play and gather and connect. And the reason why we wanted to do this was to connect communities that reside in the flats there with the festival, and give the kids the ownership and the power of having their work on their homes. So for them, they grabbed it. And I think Billy will remember too, when we showed them some sort of like little projections inside the Fitzroy Adventure Playground with pizza one evening, every single kid knew their drawing. Every single kid knew what their superpower was. And they were just free.
What
and I think it took us a while.
What powers did they have? I'm fascinated to know what kind of powers they had.
So we called it Interstellar Superheroes, and we riffed off Jacob's vision, we took the kids to the Immigration Museum to see Atem's work.
Cool.
For some inspiration, took over the museum a little bit, and then we went down to the yards and we did some sort of, you know, imaginary face painting, and we did a series of workshops. And if we didn't turn up at the playground, Billy would remember this.
Imaginary face painting. Sorry to inter.
Yeah. So I think some kids, it was about, you know, at first, you know, everyone wanted to be a well, we did have Black Panther, which was fantastic.
Cool.
The kids were all over Black Panther and had a real ownership over that concept of Black Panther as well, because obviously they could connect with it. And other kids, it was about colour, and for some of the other kids, it was about you know, just some of the things that they were familiar with. So there were flowers, there was very bright, vibrant colours. And the kids, I think the best thing that they loved was when we did some photographs, because we were projecting 9 of the kids up on the high-rise building, fingers crossed soon, with their work. And so we imagined this new multi kind of verse together, and I think the kids really enjoyed role playing, you know. And some of the superpowers were, you know, the obvious ones, flying, and there was Jigsaw Puzzle Woman, and she was a shapeshifter.
Ooh. And
shapeshifters are very much in Northeast African cultures. In one of my tribes, the Habarawal people. So I'm from the Asat clan, and then my tribes are Habarawal and Habayonis. And Habarawal tribe is known as the shapeshifters. And there's a big story that comes with that, about a girl that overcame a shapeshifter. And that resonated with that young girl who didn't know that story. Like she decided she was the shapeshifter with a jigsaw face before I told her about that story. One of the most beautiful, and I haven't got the words, one of the stories was that someone very clearly did not want to feel pain anymore, and wanted the superpower to never feel pain. So, you know, while we dreamt and we had freedom, and it was, you know, powerful kind of work, at the same time, you know, some things would resonate through. So the end result is Interstellar Superheroes, and the kids have imagined a whole new floating planet multiverse. And you know, I know that the Bianca and Jacob and everyone at the Centre for Projection Art are working really, really hard to make sure that projection goes up on the corner of Gertrude Street and Napier Street, to make sure that those kids have a big resolution and a big celebration of their work. So yeah, I think it was very interesting for me working with the kids in this environment, in the lockdown environment, because we had to come in and out to meet them, you know. And if we didn't turn up when we said we would, I got told off so bad by some very strong young black girls. Like, wow, you didn't turn up, you know. And the thing that really, you know, it might not be surprising to others, but for me, it was like every single kid knew exactly what their work was. And this was a 6-7 month project. And, you know, we were working with drawings that they might have done maybe in January and then again in April. And the ownership of it was incredible. And that sense of freedom, you know. And again, I think the last thing was, like, you know, the cultural stories and things did come up. And it was afterwards in reflection that you realised that. Yeah, that embodiment of that stuff.
It's been a privilege to watch it develop as well, you know. And for us at the centre, it was a no-brainer to use the work on the actual building itself, where they live and where they come from. This is the first time that we've used artists from Atherton Gardens, and I think it's an exciting piece that'll go up soon. Yeah.
And
awesome.
That's lovely. It's it just sounds lovely. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I remember when Jacob mentioned, he didn't say who the artists were, but he said, I think you'll be very excited about what goes up there. And so looking forward to it. Yeah, great concept. Fabulous. Yeah.
Andrea.
I was going to say, in some ways, that's made me think about my work, which is called Love Me for Myself. And the idea behind that is that just in 500 years in the future, you've got this ability to change your external appearance, and the subject in the moving image actually does that through blinking. And when they blink, they're changing their color. And so the idea, I suppose, is that I had this feeling that I wanted this notion that just in the future, you'd be able to turn into anything you want to be. And I suppose that idea came from, again, the science fiction that I was reading or watching when I was a kid, like in the 80s. And it's very much influenced from that. You can tell it's this kind of Philip K. Dickian, you know, when you look at it, you know, you will think Blade Runner and stuff like that. But going back to the past, I felt, as a Burmese person growing up in the East End of London, then coming out to Springvale in Melbourne when I was 7 years old, I always felt other. And I always had this kind of chameleon-like, well, I tried to have this chameleon-like ability to blend in. I didn't want to so much stand out, you know, because I was odd. I had a funny accent and I looked different. And I'm sure this is the story for many people who have come to Australia. But at that time, I thought it was me. And this relates to the artwork where I feel like I wanted to change my external appearance. But just like any kind of technology in the moving image, you know, the subtlety of the subconscious action of blinking changes your color. And for me, it's like a real bright, vibrant sci-fi color. It's influenced from watching you know, repeats of 60s sci-fi in the 80s, and it's influenced from reading John Wyndham or things of my, it's influenced from watching countless videos. Like it's very 80s, my work, and very music influenced, and just you know, as the blinking action changes, it's a future technology, and just like all technologies, it glitches out in the end. And so the image suddenly mirrors, it suddenly layers on top of each other, it suddenly becomes jumbled and doesn't make sense. But I suppose with the subject, and just like they want a new search, and so they can change their external appearance again. And so just like, you know, we can just Google information in this speculative future, you can just search and just change your appearance. And for the second part of the moving image, it's like a couple of images of females that are crossed over, and that intersection and layering, it just becomes more dreamlike. So it just goes through this narrative, the work.
Yeah.
It's interesting you're talking about glitches, because in one way, to me, it sounds like it's an interesting idea, with that idea that you can change your appearance, which is in one way it's kind of positive and negative, I guess, but it has it's an interesting idea of the future. But the idea that you've already built in glitches, to me, almost seems like there's a bit of distrust already in there within which I think is kind of interesting, because it's like positive yet cynical, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Like the idea, love me for myself, it's complete irony, because there's this ability to change and become have unlimited external appearance, like almost like self-projections to change your identity. And so it's totally cynical. And, you know, the idea of every technology eventually glitches out. And you might be able to, you know, turn it off and on again, and it will start up again. But every item that I've ever had or used that had technology behind it always glitched out. It's always a part of it. Right now in Coburg, we can see like a major
major glitch.
So yeah, definitely imbued with cynicism, you know, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that technology is available now. It's interesting that, you know, you can get filters and AR filters, apps that can change your whole face or body or demeanor. And it's like, it'd be intriguing to see where that goes to in the future, 500 years from now, if we've got that technology now. I was playing with it, and it's like you can age yourself. You can add a different face to yourself. You can put your face on an actor. And
how does that? Like, I've got this idea that you're walking around and you can change your appearance and
yeah,
identity.
that would be it.
For political reasons, I want to be able to, you know, walk around and not be able to be identified, and that's kind of like what I was thinking about when I was working on this piece. So
that'd be interesting. If you could change yourself to fit in more, you wouldn't be hassled. It's like,
or like I just, with my idea is that you're changing it to be anything. So like the idea was you could have partial animal, partial insect. You can just have these unlimited ideas of what you want to look. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be restrained just by human form. You can just be, so that's
but maybe the thing about the glitch is maybe with technology and advancement and all that sort of stuff, maybe it's the glitch that will keep us human, because everything will glitch. So, you know, that idea of mortality.
I also like that the glitch is a conscious thing that you've put in. It's kind of to remind you that this isn't real. It's almost, it is as a reset. It's also just a nod to the viewer, I guess, or the user.
Yeah, and technology stuff's up in the end, and so you have to it will stuff up, and you have to deal with it. Just like you know, starting this talk, it started a bit late. We deal with it, you know. No one, you know, nothing tragic happens in the end. You just switch it on and off again. Yeah, and it works. Yeah.
I don't even know if anybody's watching, so this is probably a conversation between the four of us. And it's like, I'm quite happy with that. It makes me a lot more comfortable. I think, how are we going for time? I think I'm going to read a couple of quotes, because the essay by Mark Derry was quite interesting. But like, I love when you quote rappers at the start of an essay. I think that's always a good way to start an essay. Everyone should be quoting rappers. But this is from Def Jeff, the master himself. But Mark Derry quoted from his tune Black to the Future, which starts with, "Yo, bust this, black to the future, back to the past. History is a mystery because it's all the info you need to know where you're from, why'd you come, and that'll tell you where you're going." Def Jeff, 1990. I could go on forever. I think we're starting up a playlist as well. I think.
Cool.
Which is going to be part of our online experience for the festival. So if anybody's got any playlists that sort of ties, any tunes they want to add to the list, just throw them through.
Cool.
I think, yeah, I think that's where we've gone. It's great to talk to you all. If we have any questions, do we have any questions? Heaps of questions, but I'm not going to answer them. I'm just going to pretend that we got flooded with questions. It's been fantastic talking to you all. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? I'll go through one at a time. Just
What do you
about
think?
What do you think
about the future? Whoa.
Let's start with Andrea.
Well, I just read something where someone was asking what do you want as your superhero ability? So just like the kids, you know, I of course I want to fly. You know, I want to be able to get up there, especially after being restricted in here for so long. I want to be able to fly up and go and have a bird's eye view of everything. But, you know, going back to the insects, I was saying that I love bugs. I love painting them and drawing them as well. So I want to have iridescent wings like a dragonfly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I also want to see through things. Like I want to have a robotic eye because I want to see better and be able to see through things.
There's a great show on Netflix at the moment about these kids who were born with animal features and animal abilities. Let me think about it. But there are some flying bug kids in there.
Oh, good.
Ah, yeah.
I'll have to see that. Yeah.
That's not, you're not thinking of Sweet Tooth.
That's it. That's Sweet Tooth.
That's very cute.
Sorry.
That's gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a, oh, okay. We've got a question in there too. Do you think it's important to investigate the past to have a better future? Someone has asked us.
Who would like to tackle that one? Susan.
Yeah, I think I did talk about that before. Absolutely, it's really important. I don't know why, but a lot of my practice has been around old buildings and really researching around that. And maybe it's a way of trying to find a way to connect. It starts with country, starts with a foundation. I have stuck little microphones and little cameras into like like under the floorboards where there's a basement or not a basement. I've put work down that low. And I really, really do think I have a fascination with historical stuff. And it's a really weird one because, you know, the colonizer, the colonized, that sort of thing. So in working with that, I think it's very powerful. But I think that, you know, look, we don't have to talk about the fact that we know that intergenerational trauma, for example, is, you know, we know it, but we also know now that it's scientifically proven in a Western context. But we have intergenerational everything. And we have mitochondrial DNA that comes from our mothers and our mothers and our mothers and our mothers that decides a lot about us. So we are embodied with the past. And if you want to go even further back into the past, I'm thinking of Brian Cox, we are the universe. We're all made up of that same matter. So it's very important to go backwards to be able to go forwards. But it's kind of like, to me, like a bit of a rocking motion, backwards, forwards, in a moment, you know, instead of thinking of the future and thinking of the past, it's like being in the present, but just rocking with that a little bit. And I think there's so much to be found and discovered and so much to learn, and how many shoulders are we standing on, et cetera, from within family to, you know, in the world, in the people that inspire us, and the animals that inspire us. And you know, my superpower to the other question is that I really want to be able to breathe underwater, because most of the world is under the water. So I think, yes, very important.
Kirsten, I think this is profoundly connected to your work as well, as whakapapa is connected to your history and your present, isn't it? And it's how would you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love the idea of whakapapa in general, because I think it for most people it makes sense. It's the idea that everything in the world, whether it's an inanimate object or a person or everything, person, animal, has a family tree, and it takes you back to what gives something importance is you can trace everything back to a god in the beginning. And so it's a kind of Māori understanding of the world. What I've found on my own kind of personal journey, I am a child of adoption and mixed race, so Maori and European, and you know, I've been making art for the last 20 years or something, but it was only a couple of years ago when I went back to my marae in Aotearoa, so my sort of community village centre, extended family home, I guess you could call it. It's like a marae is like a cross between a community hall and a family house. And when I went back, and I was very nervous because a lot of my arts practice has sort of been about using customary ways of making and infusing them with contemporary digital materials and all that sort of stuff. And I've always had a nervousness about what would my ancestors think of this, what would my extended family think. And when I walked into the marae, and the entire whare, the entire house was made up with, instead of having traditional materials, there was so we have what are called Tokutoku Panels, which are woven panels on the inside of a house that are slats that are kind of bound together. Traditionally, they're bound with harakeke or New Zealand flax. In my whare, it was packing tape of every colour under the sun. And I looked around and saw like the entire house was like every colour was used. And I just suddenly went, oh, like here I thought I was being really original and whatever. And I look at my ancestors and I'm like, of course I make that art. Of course I make that art the way I do, because this is my people and this is how they've made, and they've made for thousands of years. And it was that kind of realization of the past is the present. The past is informing the present all of the time, whether we're conscious of it or not. So yeah, I think that it definitely it informs my work, but I think even when I'm not aware of it, it informs my work. Yeah.
I love that. I love the idea that it makes sense of what you're doing as well. You can find it.
I love the way that you go there thinking that you're doing something unique, and then you realize it's just woven into your history.
Yeah.
With that question, I would think that you have to look at the past to go to the future, because in the past you make a lot of mistakes, and those or just you do things sometimes in an incorrect way, or in a way that's not successful. So you have to go into the future building on that and learning about that. So you always go into the future, not only taking the things that were successful, but also extending on the things that were mistakes. And so I'm thinking, I can relate this to life, but I'm also thinking about when I'm teaching or when I'm learning. When I'm first learning about something, like a software program, for example, I make so many mistakes and things just look absolute rubbish. But then I go forward and you just improve. And so your future, it becomes more refined and better. And then you rock back again and then go forward again.
That's right. I might just throw my two cents in there as well. I think, from a different perspective, I stand on the shoulders of those that come before me. And I always remember that I am privileged as well. I have lots of privilege that I know that others in my community in different countries don't have. But that's where I look to the past, is like acknowledge the past and, and move forward with that. Okay. I think we were just going to go through and ask everybody what they thought of the future. Did we do that? It's like... It got turned into what's your superhero?
Yeah. I think I just hope I'm not here in the future. I hope that I'm somewhere else in all the incredible multiverses that we don't even know about yet. And I hope that I'm energy with a bit of a conscious mind, so that I know what I'm seeing and I can remember and absorb. But yeah, I'm happy to be with the with the spirits and the ancestors, and I'm happy to travel and travel and travel and travel and travel.
Beautiful. And make your own power to light the neighborhood. Sorry.
It's still pitch black in Coburg North. Don't come here.
Kirsten, could...
Yeah, I totally agree with Susan. I think you know, my idea of the future is with the ancestors, and I think I think already some interesting things are happening. You know, like in Aotearoa, New Zealand, a river has been given personhood. Like I think mountains and rivers and land will be thought of very differently to the way we think of now, and yeah, and I kind of think that a lot more of the Indigenous ways of knowing and understanding and knowledge systems are going to be appreciated a bit more. That's my hope for the future, anyway.
Andrea.
Well, my hope, and I see this happening, is that underrepresented voices are heard, and they're not underrepresented anymore because the wider community is accepted. Everyone's accepted, and there's not this separation that we see now. We see this commercial world, we see a world connected to Earth, and we see this dichotomy. And I want the people connected to Earth and this acceptance to be normal. And I'm working towards trying to get that to be the new normal. And I try to talk about that. I aim to talk about that in my artwork as well. So just a global representation of the Earth being the authentic global representation of the Earth.
Thank you. And again, thank you all for joining me tonight. It feels like at least I didn't have to do this on my own, which would have been kind of weird. I got some friends to talk to. But thank you for bringing your knowledge, and thank you for being part of this year's Gertrude Street Projection Festival as well. I think, you know, all things aside, it's still a kick-ass show that you guys have put together. Yeah, and congratulations.